I can't pronounce the word, but there is a club for family firms that are over 300 years old. Tercentenarian. There aren't many corporates that have lasted that long, and I just think it's full of fantastic family businesses, and some of them based here in Kent. I want to read this to you because I can't remember all the details, but it's so stunning that I feel I want to just read it out. Our next speakers actually are Alan and Kathryn Hughes of the Whitechapel Bell Foundry. Has anyone here not heard of them? Okay. But what's interesting, it has cast and sold bells in Britain and beyond since 1570. That's stonking. It's amazing. And the Whitechapel Bell Foundry is Britain's oldest manufacturing business. When the foundry was established in Whitechapel in 1570, Elizabeth I was on the throne. It cast the Liberty Bell, which is an icon of American independence. And in 1856, it cast Big Ben. So a business like this doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't like it just goes on and on and on and on. It takes a lot of passion, hard work. You've got the responsibility of your forefathers. You're worried about the next generation. You're worried about how can you keep up with the times. And so I think this is a perfect example of a fantastic family business with a huge reputation, with a fantastic product, with a global name that is also one of those that is keeping up with the times. So please give a warm, hearty welcome to Alan and Kathryn Hughes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You must introduce me to your scriptwriter. We're splitting this session into two halves. So I'm doing the first bit, Kathryn's going to do the second bit. Isn't it amazing how just recently family businesses have come into the news, particularly in advertising? We first came across it in the United States, where quite strangely and for no apparent reason, companies were advertising themselves on the basis of being family-owned businesses from whatever. And that's where we first saw it. And now it's sort of come over here because, like most things that were invented in America, they eventually come to this country. And it's quite fashionable now to be a family business and to be proud of it, and also to make a big noise about when you date from. Recent research at our place would indicate we were probably more likely established around 1420. And in fact, we've been given a complete list of bell founders going back to 1420. We don't think another 150 years does anything for us, really. And if you're the oldest manufacturing company in the United Kingdom, well, at 1420 you're still only the oldest manufacturing company in the United Kingdom. So why make a fuss about it? So we're staying with 1570, and as you have just said, we are indeed members of the Tercentenarians Club, and it took me several years to be able to pronounce that, so I'm quite good at it now. And we have some these are family-owned and, importantly, family-run businesses that have been in business for at least 300 years, but modestly have been owned and run by the same family for at least 3 generations. And we have some interesting members. We have people like Hawes Bank, which interestingly is still an unlimited liability company. Berry Brothers and Rudd, Locks the hat makers. Down here in Kent, wonderful company, Dirtnell and Son, builders in Braisted, been in the same family and at the same address since 1590. Shepherd Neame Brewery, Toy Kenning and Spencer. We're a wide range of companies in terms of size and what we do, and yet we have this one thing in common, and we meet every year. And in spite of all the different things we do, the different sizes of our business, the different profitabilities of our business, we have this kind of one thing in common, and it's wonderful that we all meet once a year. Our history is actually chaotic and is very different to what you've just described. The continuity from one generation to another has been incredibly random, and up until the 19th century it had never been in one family for more than a couple of generations. we know very little about how the ownership changed. It would seem that in the will of the owner, his will would bequeath to somebody, not necessarily working for him, but possibly a family member. He would bequeath the tools of his trade, and also his assets, his metal, and in one particular will that we have, he bequeathed his fire engine. There's something about foundries and fires. The first family to own the business for any great length of time were the Mears family, and their connection was somewhat tenuous. In the mid-18th century, we were commissioned to cast for Canterbury Cathedral a bell that became known as Great Dunstan. It weighed something like 3.5 tons, and even in the mid-18th century, there was absolutely no way of moving a 3.5-ton casting from London to Canterbury. And so the decision was taken that we would build a temporary foundry in the cathedral precincts and make the mould there on site, build a furnace and cast the bell there, which was done. And a young lad, local lad, who took an interest in this and kind of visited the site every day, a chap called William Mears, when it was all finished, and it can't have been a 5-minute job, when it was all finished, he came back to London with the head moulder of the day and was eventually taken into partnership and became a partner in the company. The booklet that you all have shows a very smooth succession through from the Chapmans to the Mearses. That's absolute rubbish. That is the massaging of history. We are Chatham House Rules still, aren't we? This is the massaging of history. In fact, what he actually did was to set up in competition with the Whitechapel Foundry and caused quite a nuisance at the time, but eventually was taken back into partnership in the Whitechapel Foundry, which then continued. The Mears family probably owned the company through the most profitable years, which was the early part of the 19th century, and they busied themselves in buying up, but importantly closing down, their 4 main competitors, so that by the middle part of the 19th century, the Mears family virtually had monopoly of bell founding within this country. Monopolies never ever work well, and it was the same for us. We have a partnership agreement between 2 of the Mearses, one Charles, one George Mears, and it was quite obvious from that partnership agreement that whilst they were both making a lot of money out of the company, they absolutely hated each other, and they certainly distrusted each other enormously. We know they made a lot of money because if you visit Highgate Cemetery, as soon as you walk through the main gates, you see this enormous monument to the Mearses. Well, that had to be paid for. The Mearses, after 4 generations, had got themselves into a point of, I think, laziness we talked about over here, didn't we? And indeed laziness, so that the last of the Mears was almost penniless when he died, and he died without any sort of proper provision other than he had taken into partnership a timber merchant from Lincolnshire by the name of Steinbank. What the connection was between a timber merchant in Lincolnshire and a bell founder in London, I have absolutely no idea, but they were in partnership for a small number of years, and during that time the company traded as Mears and Steinbank, and it's a name that is still around to this day. Steinbank also made no particular provision for his demise, and when he died he simply left the business in his will to his nephew, and his nephew was a retired bank manager who knew absolutely nothing about anything except on how to run a bank. And so he inherited this business in 1884, arrived at Whitechapel and found this little shed of people who all seemed to know what they were doing, but he had no idea what he was supposed to do to keep this show on the road. At the time, the company was buying metal from a local company, and my great-grandfather used to visit on a regular basis to sell metal. And he walked through the door, met Mr. Lawson, who had just inherited the business, and tried to sell him metal. And the conversation ended a little while later with my great-grandfather being offered the position of general manager at the age of 22. Lawson died in 1904, and my great-grandfather made an offer to Lawson's widow to purchase the company. And it was probably the only offer she got. So within about 2 days she accepted it. And from that point forward, the Hughes family took ownership of the company. The Mearses hated each other so much that they separated the property from the trading company. So what we were actually buying into was simply a trading company. We really didn't own the buildings or the land upon those buildings, and we were continuing to pay rent to what was left of the Mears family. Up until that time, the company had traded as a partnership, not as a company, not a limited or indeed an unlimited company. And we felt by the 1950s that partnerships for a manufacturing company at any rate was a rather old-fashioned way of doing business. And so, for reasons I've never really understood, we took the decision in the late 1950s to form an unlimited company. And because the Mearses had operated the company for so many years, the company was formed as Mears and Steenbank Unlimited. In 1960, the Mears family decided they didn't want the property anymore, and they wanted to sell it. And as we were occupying, we were given the first choice of buying the company. And so in 1960, we were offered the buildings and the land sat thereon for the princely sum of £20,000, which we couldn't afford. So we took out a 10-year mortgage, and come 1970, we then found that we owned the buildings and the land. In 1968, our legal advisors said to us, "Do you realise that you are trading as an unlimited company?" And we said, "Well, yes, of course we did." And they said, "Have you thought about the implications of trading as an unlimited liability company?" And we said, "Well, no, we hadn't thought about it." And so they said, "Think about it." So we thought about it. And in 1968, we formed Whitechapel Bell Foundry Limited, separating the trading company from the land. I can't speak of the difficulties that the Mearses and the people who came before the Mearses faced. We do know that in times of war, nobody wants to buy bells. And we do know that as a foundry, we were engaged in making castings for the armaments industry, which kept us going through those times. It is said that we cast some of the cannon that we used for fighting the Armada. We can't substantiate it, and it's a lovely story, and you should never ever let facts get in the way of a good story. Certainly history repeated itself in the Second World War, because again, no one wanted bells during the Second World War, so we were engaged in producing aluminium castings for the Admiralty. They were undoubtedly our most profitable years, because we were approached to produce a product. We had to produce so many per week, and we were guaranteed that order. We were told how much we were going to be paid for those castings, and it was a far higher price than it need be. And we were paid promptly. Now, most of our work is for the Church of England. The Church of England have never ever guaranteed us any one of those things, let alone all three. The disadvantage, of course, was that being in the East End of London, we attracted the Germans every night. But we survived. The Hughes family's tenure has not been easy. My great-grandfather, although he was anxious to purchase the business, soon realised that owning and running a bell foundry was a difficult task. And I suspect, bearing in mind that the First World War was taking place at the time, he became so depressed that he shot himself successfully. He had 3 sons. One of them decided that the company had absolutely no future whatsoever, and without any consultation with the rest of the family, arranged to sell the company to the 600 Group. It did, however, require the signature of my grandfather, who declined to give it. So the son left. The second son, some 10 years later, was found fiddling the books. So he also left. That left my grandfather. My grandfather also was convinced that the company would not survive. So he arranged for his 2 sons to have good alternative employment in other industries. One was in insurance, the other was working for the Thornycroft Group, whose head office was in Smith Square. Work was at a very low level, But along comes the Second World War, and that really saved our bacon. Just as the Great Fire of London, 350 years ago this year, gave us a golden opportunity to cast lots of new bells, Hitler also had the same effect upon churches, mainly in London. One could almost argue that Hitler was probably our best salesman. Nobody is all bad. Wine, albeit vintage wine, it was lovely, by the way. It really was lovely. Let's hear it for the wine. It was great. Once the bottle is drunk, it's gone. Plants. Trees last a fair time, but annuals and things like that, no, not really. Bells last an awful long time. There are 2 bells at Westminster Abbey, which we cast in 1583. They're still there. They're rung every single day. There's nothing wrong with them. And they've been heard by both of the Elizabeths. One thing is absolutely sure in our tenure at Whitechapel, and that is this, that with my great-grandfather, with my grandfather especially, with my mother, with my father especially, and also his brother Douglas, and also now me, without our wives, we could not have carried on those businesses. No question of it. It's not that we necessarily married people to help us in our business, but all of them have stepped up to the plate, and their contribution has been absolutely enormous. And I cannot overstate the importance of all of those wives, including my own. You have only had male speakers so far. I think it's only right you should finish with a female speaker.
Got to live up to that one then, haven't I? Alan and I met some 40 years ago when I was a student in London. I was a music student, but I was also a bell ringer. And I went out with somebody who worked at the Whitechapel Bell Foundry. And I went along there and I thought, oh, this is quite an interesting place, very old, quite interesting. And then the following summer I didn't go out with that person anymore, and I sort of quite fancied the chap now sitting there. I don't quite know why, but, you know, there we go. And we had a long courtship. We finally married after we'd been going out for 9 years. And one of the early conversations I remember when I said, well, I'd really quite like to go out somewhere this evening and do something. And Alan said, no, he couldn't. And I said, you keep saying no to everything that we could do together. And he said to me, and I've never forgotten it, first comes my company. Second comes my family. And you come third. I think I'm now second, but I'll never get to be first. Never. That's the trouble with the trouble and the advantage of being part of a family business. It does take you over. You are totally committed to what you do. You are looking after your staff. You are making a product. You have to have faith in the product you're making. We do. We've been making the same product for 400, 500, depending upon how you look at our dates, years. And our products do last far too long. So where's your market? Okay, you can't sell a bell to the same people over and over and over again. So you have to look to sell them hopefully to other people. And I would like to think that in some of the things that I have done in the company, Alan has always worked in the company. He has never been anywhere else. I, as a musician, did work elsewhere, and I worked in other companies as well before I actually joined Alan when I think your father died on a Saturday and I joined the business full-time on the following Thursday, because somebody had to. And we have run the business now together for a long time. We didn't have computers, and I can remember somebody saying to me, we don't need computers, we're not a computer company. Well, we have computers and we couldn't manage without them, could we? Even you use a computer, occasionally. He even has an iPad. It occasionally comes out, it's quite good. He won't, however, use a mobile phone that he can get his emails on. He has a dumb phone and won't have an email phone. But one day, we'll have an email phone. Online shopping, something that everybody now does. The Whitechapel Bell Foundry having an online shop? Biggest problem, looked at it for a long time. What do you charge for your postage? Because you could be selling something that weighs 6 tons, and you could be selling something that's a silver necklace. Well, about 3 years ago, we were approached by a startup Swedish company called Ticktail. And they thought that to launch their advertising and sales in this country, the newest company fixed up with the oldest company might be a great way forward. So somebody phoned me up, as they do, these advertising people, and they say, you know, For absolutely nothing, we will do an online shop for you. And you say, no, where's the catch? No, it will cost you absolutely nothing. Well, I had about half-hour conversation with their publicity person, and he sent me a bunch of flowers because he said it was the most interesting conversation of someone trying to refuse something that he had ever had. A bunch of flowers were great, so I said yes. Tigtail came along, and they took some photographs, and they designed up a website for us, and we launched it, and it got national press, and it was great. That little shop sells all our small stuff because they said, look, don't put everything on there, just put the things that you can post. And then you know what you're going to charge for postage. So we sell doorbells, and we sell table bells, and we sell servants' bells, and we sell jewellery, and little things that we make. And that's actually created quite a business for our small bell side of what we do. Downton Abbey, great idea. Duchess, bell. We sell loads of those. I don't know how many people have butlers, but maybe it's more than we thought, you know? But we sell lots of these bells. Great idea, christening presents, wedding presents, we can engrave them. Sorry, this isn't a sales pitch. So that has been a way forward for the company to sell online. It's something that we weren't sure we would ever be able to do. We also do tours. Tourism is a growing market. And we are an old established business. We are a grade 2 star listed building, 18th century, and we have old workshops. People are fascinated by old workshops, tools that you do things with, dirt on the floor. It's quite incredible, really, that we actually still produce real things with real tools, and people do pay to come. I remember you saying to me, Alan, people would never pay to come to look at the Whitechapel Bell Foundry. Well, they do, in droves. Our Saturdays are now taken up with also working, as well as Monday to Friday, showing visitors around the foundry. They pay £15 per head to come. They come from far and wide. In fact, some are even coming, I think, from Kent later this year, because Cooling, as I note, have booked some tours. They're bringing coach loads to come on one of our tours. Thanks very much. You know, but it's great. It's extraordinary, the people who come. We sell out every Saturday, and in fact, next ticket's available the 24th of September. We have quite a lot left in December, but then the rest of it is fully sold out. Working in a family business and staying married. Not always easy, but most days we laugh. We laugh quite a lot. We both have a good sense of humour. It's quite a sarcastic sense of humour, but we do have a good sense of humour. And our children have been brought up the same way. Our children have been brought, although they're not, we don't know whether they will in the end come into the company, but they have been brought up as members of a family business, which means that they have commitment to what they do. Our elder daughter is actually a concert pianist. You need hellish commitment to be able to do that. Our younger daughter works for Waitrose, so she'll be selling your wine soon, no doubt. When things go wrong at Waitrose, Lizzie will stay and help. Lizzie would never walk away, and she has climbed up the ladder quite a long way, although she's only 25. And I'm sure that is because of her upbringing in a family business, where you do what you have to and you don't go home till it's done. Now, sometimes as a family, that means that we don't go home till like 10 o'clock at night, or we'll just stay the night at the foundry. We've got a flat there, because it's easier than driving all the way home and driving all the way back again. But that's great. Because we both work there, we can understand that it has to be done. I think if you were in a family business and your other half doesn't work with you, it's perhaps a much more difficult thing to understand that they have to be home late or they have to go really early. We can have a board meeting in the car on the way home. That's great, because there's only the two of us. Sometimes it'd be nice to have someone else to share it with, but it's all good fun most of the time. But you share the downs, you share the ups. We've had some amazing experiences. We are a tiny, tiny little company with a turnover of £1.5 million. I mean, it's minute. But we've met the Queen. We've met Prince Charles. We did the bell for the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. We did the bells for the barge that led the Queen's Jubilee procession. We made Big Ben. We made the Liberty Bell. I mean, it's a phenomenal history for such a tiny little company operating out of sort of like half an acre in London. The children, as they grew up, would have holidays with us, usually based around where we were exhibiting. So they would say at primary school to their friends, "We're going to America." And the kids would say, "What, to Disney?" And I would say, "No, Charleston, South Carolina, or Des Moines, Iowa." And people would go, "Oh." But they are very well travelled and they've enjoyed every minute of it. And they do say that they did enjoy it. Although they did buy mugs at one stage which said slave labour on, when they would help us out cleaning, tidying, sorting and doing all those little jobs that you do with your children to get them involved in the business. But we still are a very strong family, and I think we've kept the business going because we're strong. We're stubborn. It often defies economic sense to stay in business. It would be great to just sell up. But we're a Grade 2 star listed building. It's actually very little value, even though it's in a prime location site. Inheritance. If we sold up, you lose the 40% and capital gains and all the rest of it. What we have done, we have formed a group of companies because the property company wasn't a trading company, with the help of Factory Williams and with the help also of McBride's, our accountants. So we have a trading group, so that it can hopefully be passed down as a trading company. If we come to sell, or if we have to change what we do because of diversity and economic situation, we're almost on top of Crossrail. Everything around us now is becoming flats, hotels, flats, posh flats, £1.5 million flats next door. How long are we going to go on being able to produce, making noise, throwing smoke out of our chimneys in such an environment? We don't know. We'll go on for as long as we can. It could be that in the future, our future may have to cease being manufacturing, but possibly become tourism, small stuff, living on the site as a museum. I hope not. I hope we can continue to be the oldest manufacturing company. But the future, when you're a family, is always the family. Always the family. And it's what your family want to do. My daughters have to make the decision with us whether they want to continue the business. I know they could if they're doing the museum, the schools, the visits, because they understand that. Understanding manufacturing. When we first got married, our bank manager said you need to have 6 sons. I said no way, but maybe the larger family with more to choose from. I don't know. Is that a good way for a business, for a family business? Maybe it's easier for us. Alan doesn't have a brother who could challenge him. So when we make the decisions, it's just us. So maybe, being that small at the top might be part of the recipe for our success. Success, however, the company started small. The company is still small. Is that successful? We're still there. Thank you very much.